Okay. I just was talking to the camera for 10 minutes or a few minutes, but now it looks like I'm actually live. Um, I think, maybe. Oh. Okay, so welcome. Sorry about some glitches. So, first off, I scheduled the stream to happen, but I think I used a different stream key than what my ATEM knows about. And so then I started the stream from the ATEM, which tried to connect to um, a different stream key. And so the one that was scheduled is still scheduled. And then this one that was actually going live was not the one that was scheduled. And I think people joined one and I couldn't see anybody. So I killed everything and started over. I think I think this is going to work better. So sorry about that. Hopefully now I'll be able to yeah, exactly. I eventually I'll have all this figured out and it'll just work every time, but it's going to take a while. I used to work with a guy who has this down. He it schedules everything ahead of time, like a week in advance, and then he shows up, and everything just works flawlessly every single time. That's and I was a co-host with him for a little bit. That was Brett Fisher, and it just like has this super professional show. It helps that he's got his wife as well, kind of managing everything. Maybe if it was just him, he'd be as incompetent as I am. Uh, but anyway, I think I started to say that yesterday I dropped off my daughter Stella and my wife Tony at the airport yesterday morning, and took a little while to get down there. We have two routes to get to the airport. We can either take the ferry across or we can drive around, and they both take about the same amount of time. But driving around meant that we could stop off at Lone Star Donuts, which is amazing in Bremerton or Silverdale, and then continue around. And then I took the ferry back. And taking the ferry back is always beautiful. You get, I happen to just miss the previous ferry by 2 minutes. So I had to wait about 45 minutes for the next one. And then I get on, and I am just one shy of being the absolute front of the ferry. And so, it's just, let's see, can I think I took a picture of my view. Yeah. So if I do this, nope, not that one. That one. I should see. This was my view to get home. Ooh, there we go. So that was my view. It looks a little bit washed out on there, but it was beautiful blue skies, just absolutely perfect, just gorgeous for the entire ride back. I was able to pop open my iPad to do a little bit of work. Yesterday, I spent some time going through all the comments on all the videos from the last few weeks, and anytime somebody suggested something, oh, you should take a look at this, or you should take a look at that, making sure I took note of it because I wrote it down somewhere, and then I don't know what happened to it. And I think I need to also go through the chat. That's probably a different place. And you make sure I've got all that documented so that it's in my list of, whenever I'm going to make a new video, it can be there. But anyway, it was a gorgeous ride over from downtown Seattle to Bainbridge Island. And the benefit of yes, it's sad to see my wife and daughter go off to Detroit. They do this every year, but and they're going to be gone for about a month. Um, got FaceTime scheduled every day, but the benefit of that happening is now I've got a month where I'm not. It's a month of being really hard for my wife because she's got full on duties taking care of Stella. But I have this amazing gift of being able to really double down and focus on YouTube, on streaming, on all the things. So I'm very excited, and one of the benefits is this stream. I'm going to see how it goes um, with doing this every day. I'm going to try to do this every day at 9:30 Pacific time. That's what roughly when I initially tried to start. I actually started maybe 10 minutes late, but I'm going to try to go for 9:30 to 10:30 every day. Do a stream, and it'll be rough at first, but we're going to try that. And yeah, we'll see how it goes. Shivex asks, what mic are you using? I've been looking for a mic to cut out rain and background noise. Rain. Interesting. So my audio setup is definitely a little bit more advanced than most people. So there's a few things going on that really help with the quality of the audio, and you don't need to go, all this way. Depends on what you're doing. I mean, if you're doing videos like this kind of thing where you're talking to a camera, well, first off, if you're just doing audio and you don't need to be seen, and it's like for a pre-recorded video, and you don't have much stuff, probably the best thing you can do is, get your phone, iPhone or Android, whatever, and record into that. But not just that. Um, sit in your chair at your desk, but get a quilt or a big heavy blanket. Hopefully it's not too hot where you are, but and then cover yourself in that, and that's going to kind of create this makeshift booth to record, and it cuts out a lot of the echo. You could also do this on your bed, but then you have absolutely no reflection of audio, and you want some sort of surface in there to have a little bit, but not too much. Now, if you're on camera, having a quilt over your head makes you look like an idiot. So that's not going to work. But if you have any sort of blankets or anything to put on the walls, I happen to have in front of me, just right there, there, and there, and you can see too in the background, as well as right above me, are these sound panels. They're actually called bass traps, from a company called GIK Acoustics, GIK Acoustics, and they're a much more expensive way to go because they're, I don't know, $300 per, maybe $200 per panel. But that cuts so much, and yet there is still a little bit of echo, which is good. It makes it sound like you're not in a completely dead room, because when you are in a dead room, it sounds weird. So I have those as well. And then what is the actual mic? This is a Octava MK12. It is a Russian mic, and I don't know how I found them, but it's just out of view of the camera. Actually, it's probably quite a bit out of view because it's my video is way delayed. But yeah, it's maybe 2 feet away from me, a foot and a half away from me. And I've got a little bit of a pop filter on there that's just for that. Well, I don't know if it's just for that mic, but it's for shotguns in general, or boom. I don't think that counts as a shotgun mic. I think it's a boom mic, something that would normally be at the end of a long boom, on a controlled set, not outside. A lot of shotgun mics are really meant for outside work. And so that's really nice. It's relatively inexpensive for a microphone. It's probably $300. You don't have to start there. I think my first one was a shotgun from Asden, which worked really well for me. And that gets fed into a audio interface, which is a Universal Audio Quad Apollo Twin Quad X, which is way overkill if you're just doing recorded for most people starting out. I mean, because that's $1,500, but that's probably the third audio interface I've had over the years, starting off with a M Audio, something that was maybe $100, to a iConnectivity, iConnect Audio, I think it was, interface, which was maybe $200, and then I upgraded to that eventually. Yeah, so starting out, if it's as I say, a pre-recorded video, throw the quilt over your head and record it. Again, it's best if it's not super hot. If it is super hot, I don't know. That's a challenge. Find a room that is not super small, that you can have some quilts or some other blankets up on some sort of stand. So one of the things I did originally was I had a whole bunch of light stands. So none of these things can be done absolutely cheaply, but some light stands are pretty cheap. You can get them on, $15-20 for a really cheap one, and then get some PVC pipe, drill a hole into it so that it balances right at the top of that, and then drape your cloth or your blankets or sheets over that, and then put those around you, and that's going to absorb a lot of that echo. So yeah, that's a long, long answer for what would you do. From Madhusutanan. Madhusutanan B. It's a very interesting name. Madhusutanan. Started watching your videos today when searching for how to build agents with TypeScript/JavaScript. Really good content so far. Thank you very much. Really like the way you have simplified function calling. Yeah. Yeah, function calling is one of those things that, the name implies something that it's not. At least where OpenAI was when they originally introduced function calling, it's just about outputting a repeatable JSON blob, or JSON format, and then your application then consumes that and does something with it. So I'm glad you found that interesting. And then I did a video about doing agents. And one of the things with agents is you want your agent to be able to request additional information from some sort of external function. So it should be able to output not only what the answer is, but also maybe ask for more information. And so I'm going to call this particular function with these parameters so that you can call the function and reliably do that without having to do much error checking or rely on like kludges, like Pydantic, or guardrails, or all sorts of other things that you really shouldn't need to use if the model is reliably outputting the right JSON. And then you can call your function, return that back to the model so the model can process it and do more interesting things with it, and then spit out a great answer. So I'm glad you found me. Thank you so much, and that you found the videos useful. And technically, none of those from Shivax, technically none of those agent frameworks are really required. DIY for the win. Absolutely. I have not found a agent framework that is actually worth using. At this point, this is where somebody is going to say, have you looked at Fabric? And no, I haven't looked at Fabric. But that's always the answer. I need to look at Fabric. And so maybe now that I've got all this oodles of time, I will have time to look at Fabric. One of the other things I'm doing with all this oodles of time is making sure that, an hour after the stream is done, I'm going to actually go through the stream and pull out all the good chunks, maybe convert those into shorts, or at least be able to catalog what did I say, put chapter markers on that. So these streams, one person actually commented, it's like, I don't know if you know, but nobody actually watches your stream after the fact. And it's not quite true, because there's 2,000, 3,000 views on some of these streams a week after they go public. But that could probably be a little bit more if I had some chapter markers. So that's another one of the things I'm going to be doing over the next month, which I'm looking forward to. I don't know why I said that. I've got a ton of value from your videos and just wanted to say thank you, Matt, from Mikey at DNS Filter. Cool. Is DNS Filter a thing? Is that like a company? Obsidian pages for comments and chats. Yeah, I do. My website is there's a section on my website which doesn't get a whole lot of love, but it really should. That is just where I automatically publish stuff for my Obsidian vault. But DNS filter, I'm gonna look this up. Is this like a page? Yeah, you can see I pay attention to the Datadog stock because that lets me do what I do. DNS. What is this? DNSfilter.com. Interesting. I can't make this thing go away. Oh, yeah, you don't need to see that I'm prepping for the stream and streaming. Cool. Dogs barking in the background. Yeah. One thing that's happened for the first maybe I should just leave the top of the page available. Maybe a big screen, dnsfilter.com. Anyway, I've been getting so many more requests over the last, really it started maybe a month ago, 2 months ago. We'd love to sponsor your video. And they say, well, here's this content that's directly applicable to your audience. It'll be perfect. And then they point to something. It's like, nobody in my audience cares about that kind of stuff. The latest one was, it was some RAG tool, but it's using ChatGPT, and I didn't really see what value they add. So first off, okay, it's a product with no real value, and then I just didn't like what they were trying to sell, and yeah, any sponsorship I take has to be something that I really enjoy, I really find interesting, and I won't do a sponsor without that. So the question that comes up, was the Brev video sponsored? No, it was not. I just really like Brev. That's purely where that came from. I got no money at all. I've reached out. So one of the investors in Brev that helped get them started was a woman that I used to work with at Datadog. So she was, I feel like she was originally in marketing, and she left Datadog to a kind of a boot camp, a coding boot camp, and she did that. She came back to Datadog for a little bit as a developer, and then left and did something else. And well, I think she did pretty well with the IPO, Datadog IPO, because she started long before I did, and I was employee 30 or 35. So she did far better than me, probably orders of magnitude more. And she's used that to invest in smaller companies. And one of the companies was Brev. And so I kind of had a connection to them, and I'd spoken to Nader, who's one of the two founders, and really liked what they did. I made the video. After that video was made, much later, they gave me some credit on Brev. And at one point, I forgot to turn off a machine that was actually really expensive, and looked again. Well, actually, my wife said, why are we paying Brev $100 every 10 minutes for the last 4 days? I was like, and they were very nicely able to credit that back, so I didn't have to pay that. But yeah, so they've given me stuff since that video was put out, but the video wasn't sponsored. And there's more stuff that there's definitely some new videos that I'm going to do that are based on some of the new features. So apparently that video made some huge impacts for their business. The number of customers increased by a lot. And they've made improvements to the product specifically for Ollama users. So that's great. And maybe in the future we'll do something more together. But so far, none of the content has actually been sponsored by Brev. All right, that's enough of a free ad for DNS filter. Let's go over there. From Mikey, I used AI to automatically create some blog content with Python for work, and your videos were clutch. Okay, that sets your age, because I don't know anybody my age that uses that word as clutch. Although in fact, I had to ask when I was at Datadog, it's like, what's up with the word clutch? It's like, what? That's like a key word in life. Your videos were clutch to help me understand how it all works together. Even used ChatGPT to help me write the scripts. Awesome. Yeah, I am early day. I mean, so I've been using AI mostly in coding, but I haven't really used much in the terms of content creation. You just work with the youngsters. Now, often people say, "Oh, I'm old," and then they reveal their age, like, you're young. So I used to work at when I worked at Datadog, I was surrounded by these 20-somethings, which was amazing. I always loved being around them because they were all like far fitter than me. It was just a great place to be. And I felt, because I was around these people, I felt like, oh, I'm that age too. And then as soon as I left, like, oh no, I really am 50. I felt like I was 20. And then some of them would say, wait, how old are you? And they figure out my age, like, my grandfather is younger than you. Or one of them had a grandfather that was about my age, which was really weird. Now you have to be your parents have to be really young when they gave birth to you, and their parents had to be really young. But still, it's possible that I am the same age as somebody's grandfather. In fact, somebody made a comment on one of my videos, like, "Oh, your videos sound like my granddad." Yeah, and we have a 5-year-old, so something's wrong there. Um, I'd say your age. I am 40. Yeah, I did say I said actually a younger age. So I am, what year is it? 2024 before October. Okay, so I'm 53 years old. So 44, you're young. 9 years younger than me. Kid. Child. Do you have any models, recommendations for embedding code? Ah, yeah. So doing content embedding, usually going to use a embedding model. And I don't know if doing that embedding for code is different than text. I've never I didn't think about that. I don't know. I mean, I don't have any specific recommendations for embedding models that know about code. I mean, I always stick to nomic embed text, but I don't know. um, yeah, I don't know. So no, I don't. But I should write that down. Where was I writing that down? I was writing that down in my list. Oh, okay. Uh, that's not it. That's not it. That's not it. That's not it. I don't know what that is. Okay. Mm, what did I call it? Um, I was just putting together a list of videos to do. No, what did I call this thing? A look in how I do stuff. Here's my bad list of. Oh yeah, here's the all the things I was collecting from recent videos. Um, was this the one? Yeah, it was. So, special embedding models specifically for code embedding. That's a cool idea. Um, let's go just to me. From Shivax, are instruct models better suited for agent work? Because those were the only models that helped with agent communication for me. So typically there's instruct, or there's going to be something like instruct or chat. And I've been told that they're different, although everybody who has explained that they're different uses basically the same definition for both. So apparently they're different, but they're really close. But there's often like a text or a base model. And the text or base model is really a completion model where you give it a series of text and it will complete that text. Or even some of the like coding models are, I guess they're more of an closer to instruct, where they have a specific format. So a text model is usually going to be not fine-tuned for a specific format. You just give it the text and it will continue. Once upon a time in the land of, and it will continue with Papa D, there was a rogue something. Anyway, continue the story. But the instruct models are going to be, okay, here's a question, and you're going to answer with an answer. And here's a question, you're going to answer with the answer. In the case of coding models, there's often going to be a fill in the blank, or Um, here's a beginning set of code. Here's the continuation of that code. Put stuff in the middle. And that's how those work. And so if you're going to, if your agent, I mean, agent is just a prompt, you're saying, here's a bunch of text, do this stuff, that's going to be definitely an instruct model, because it's really just, here's this question and give me the answer. So yes, I would say instruct models are better suited for agent work versus a purely text model that is just going to complete what you're doing. I was just noticing I am wearing a t-shirt from Hell's Canyon Raft, which is, if you're ever in the market for a great trip, Hell's Canyon Raft was amazing. We did rafting down the Snake and Salmon River in Idaho. Gorgeous place. 4 or 5 days, easy rafting. This is not something you're going to die on. Well, though, that said, my mother's boyfriend's son, who was a firefighter in Seattle, was the chaperone on a Boy Scout trip with his son and all of his fellow Boy Scouts on this exact same river, and was actually killed on the river. So, but normally, in most cases, this is not a trip that you can get killed on. Unlike the first rafting trip I did, which was going down the Colorado River through the Grand Canyon, and that's rated as one of the 2 or 3, most violent rivers in the world for rafting. And some of those, there's one called Lava Canyon or Lava Rocks or something like that, and there's a straight drop of 30, 40 feet that you're in this raft, and then the raft gets to the bottom and it like bends, and so if your foot is in the wrong place, you will break your foot, because there's this massive raft that's just folding in half, and people get thrown out of the boat. You have to really hold on tight, otherwise you will. And apparently every boat comes back with somebody with a broken leg, broken arm, broken whatever. My wife broke her ankle on the trip, actually on the first day, and somebody else who happened to be a fighter pilot in younger years, his back totally gave out, and he was lying basically on a stretcher for a lot of the trip. So I mean, it's a extremely dangerous trip. But going down the Snake and Salmon, easy. Very rarely do people. In fact, when I went on the trip, I mentioned to them that, this connection to somebody who died on the river. Everybody knew exactly who that person was, because it happens so rarely that, and apparently that company went out of business, and all the people that were involved are no longer involved in rafting. It was such a memorable case because it so rarely happens. Anyway, I don't know how I get into. Oh, because I'm looking at my shirt. I was like, why did I get into rafting on a video about AI? That's weird. Any other questions? I'm going to be doing this every day. We'll see. I'm going to try at 9:30 to 10:30 Pacific time. What was I going to do? I was going to, actually, to give you more context, I'm trying to build from Matthew Bolliand. I'm trying to give you more context. I'm trying to build a solution to have a fine-tuned model on source code by having a vector for each function in the code, and get the 15 closest vectors of the question. Yeah, that sounds great. I for my coding stuff, I did a video about Twinny early on, as well as some other model. And the problem that I had was that none of the local models, really can get enough context. And even Copilot, Copilot's this thing that's, uh, uh, sorry, when I say Copilot, I mean GitHub Copilot, um, is this amazing service that collects a bit of your code, or usually just the current page of your code, and then can give you answers based on that. But even then, it's not enough context, and there are lots of other solutions, Continue, or the problem is, how do they get enough of the context of what you're doing? And so the one AI service that I use that is not purely local, well, is it the one? Yeah, so really the one that I use daily is from SuperMaven, and that's a code completion service. Pay $10 a month, and it's amazing. But it's got a 300,000 token context window, and really can bring in most of your code within any application. And so the suggestions it gives are actually totally on point with, including your variables that you use somewhere else within your code, and it's amazing. That said, I'd love to see. I really should stop using SuperMaven for a little bit to re-review where are things at with local models for coding. Um, yeah, so how does that compare with to Tab 9? So Tab 9 was the first one, the first of the coding models that were available for um, reading in your code, and then as you make requests, it would give you a suggestion for as you're typing in your code, it will kind of complete the rest of your line or maybe a few extra lines. Tab 9 was the first one out there, and it's amazing. It's amazing what you can do with Tab 9. Um, a little bit later, maybe a year or 2 years later, is when GitHub Copilot started. So Tab 9 is, as far as I know, the first of these solutions that comes out. And I get this wrong every time. Where is Tab 9 from? Let's super source, me, MacBook Pro. Okay, so about. It doesn't say where they are. Where are the open positions? London, Tel Aviv. Yeah, I thought they were an Israeli company, but I'm not really sure where they're totally based. Contact us. Where is their main office? They make it hard to find out where are they really based. Um, hmm. Yeah, I say I thought they were an Israeli company, but so they started, as I say, they started everything. So where is Super Maven? So one of the two, I think one or two founders of Tab 9 left Tab 9 and started his own new company, and that is Super Maven. So one of the people that originally came up with Tab 9, really came up with this whole space, left and started a new company called Super Maven. And that's the connection. How does it compare? I mean, I paid for Tab 9 for 2 years, 3 years, and found it amazing. But I no longer pay for Tab 9, and I do pay for Super Maven. Okay, Shivax. I've been working on a project for creating newsletters, but the model loses focus halfway through. Yeah, and starts rewriting stuff, trying to figure out an ideal model for that. Yeah, I mean, I think that's context is a big thing there. Um, how big is the newsletter? I would love to find a way to. I mean, I have this newsletter I've created at technovangelist.com/newsletter, and I'm terrible about writing the newsletter. Having something that would generate a lot of that content for me, and maybe not the whole newsletter, but really just generate some content for my blog would be amazing. I haven't. That said, I don't know if I feel like generation of content just isn't that great for a lot. I mean, that's most of the reason I don't use it for a lot of stuff is that generating a whole article, they're usually not that good, and so I stick with just small paragraphs or sentences. Fill out the rest of this sentence, or and actually, what I actually do use an AI model for. I use Whisper for doing speech to text. And then I will clean that up using a model rather than having it generate from scratch the text. The Whisper tool that I'm actually using is called Super Whisper on Mac, and it's amazing. But yeah. Hello from Debjit to Biswas. Can I ask a question? Of course you can. I work with PHP and React, so can I use an API and make RAG with it? Yes, absolutely. PHP, JavaScript, any language, doesn't really matter. As long as... So I'm not sure... I think most of the different AI services, local services have a API that you can work with. So there's probably going to be a Python and a JavaScript API for that, but there's also going to be probably a RESTful endpoint that you can use. And then as long as you've got your language can make a call to some RESTful endpoint, which I think every recent language can. Although I tried to look into, well, how would I do this from COBOL or some of those languages, and I couldn't find any sort of REST way of doing a fetch. But as long as your language can, and of course PHP can, I think, then you can totally use the RESTful endpoints. Ollama definitely offers that, but so do the other LM Studio or something else that you want to use. Can totally do that. So yeah. I mean, how do you do it? Well, I mean, RAG is mostly is a specific series of steps. You take in your content, you split it up into smaller pieces, and then embed each of those pieces. Pretty important to split it up because usually you don't want to do the entire document because you might miss some of the nuances of different pieces of that document. And then, so you split it up into small pieces, embed that, store that into some sort of vector data store. It can be a vector database, or it could just be a JSON document on the file system. Usually a vector database is going to be faster, but you have to get into some pretty big numbers of chunks before you really see that benefit. But it's pretty easy to use something like a ChromaDB, or there's a whole bunch there's 50 plus vector databases out there. So push that into some sort of vector database, and then you've got the query, whatever the person wants to know, why is the sky blue? And then you do the embedding of that question, and now you've got this embed of the question that somebody's asking, and a whole bunch of embeds in the vector database, and you do a similarity comparison. And there's formulas for doing this, and this is possible because the vectors that are in the database are all the same size. They're all, let's say, 1,000 numbers, and the question is that same size. And so we can do this mathematical comparison and find all the embeddings that are closest to that initial query. And you have some threshold. Maybe only show me the top 10 or top 5 chunks. And then in the database, we've stored both the embedding and the source text. And so you return the source text, and then you hand the model your question, your source, text question, along with the source, the 10 chunks, but just the actual text, and hand that off to the model. So the model doesn't know anything about embeddings. It just knows about text going in, and then it can come up with a good answer and spit it all out. And that's RAG. You think you can make a median of 2 embeddings? A median of 2 embeddings. Like an average. I don't know. I haven't thought. I mean, it's just math. So yeah, I mean, it's just 2 numbers. But I don't know if that would make sense. Would the median of the numbers, would it still have the same meaning, or the median of the meaning? I don't know. I don't know if that works that way. From, that's a good name. Okay, so first off, Madhus, I butchered that name before, but I'm going to try it again. Madhusatanan. Me and my team will be building agentic solutions down the line in an internal code fest. We'll be using Ollama, Node, TypeScript, and some UI. Can you suggest right areas to focus for beginners? I mean, you list all the things. I can't. I think the biggest thing, one of the complaints one of the trends of comments that people had on the crew video was, well, often we don't know the workflow, the flow of that it needs to go through. We don't know that ahead of time. Which, and maybe that one particular one said, well, the developer doesn't know, the actual workflow that an accountant or a lawyer needs to go through to come up with the answer. And that response showed me, okay, well, basically the developer is not doing their job of finding out the workflow. And so long ago, before, let's see, after I was working at Microsoft, I joined a company called Capteris. And Capteris had a workflow solution called, what was it called? It was called Teamplate. And so I was a trainer on Teamplate for a while. And Teamplate, just like any workflow solution, any business process management process, the hardest part, you can come up with all the code to document a flow through all the different people. One of the flows that I had to work on was for the United States Navy. How do they get all the approvals and all the stories involved for granting somebody the Navy Star, Navy Cross, all the different awards to soldiers. And the hardest part is really just understanding what is that flow, because everybody, especially if there's a flow that involves multiple people, nobody knows the entire flow. Everybody knows their piece. They receive some chunk of information from that person, and they do something with it, and they hand it off to that next person. And understanding how business data goes from person to person to person, or in the case of a simple workflow that only one person does, how it goes from step A to B to C to D, is the hardest part, and it requires a lot of interviews, and maybe the developer doesn't do that, but it's going to be somebody in the development team that needs to figure out what is the flow throughout the entire process. And if you're not having those discussions where you're just kind of grasping at straws and hoping that you're going to find the solution that actually you're trying to replace, and maybe it's going to work, But it's a whole lot better if you take that existing workflow that has been figured out based on a lot of years of work, um, and try to replicate that. So and so many of these comments were like, well, we can't possibly know that. Like, well, do your job then. To go find out what the process is, and come up with and so every one of those comments of like we can't possibly know is like, yeah, you can, and that's the hard part. Get that done so that you don't have to figure out the process every single time somebody makes a request. It's just wasted effort. You know what I mean? Even if you have to figure it out using the AI one time, now code that in so that it always takes that flow rather than having to figure it out every single. It just blows my mind that people want to refigure out the workflow every single time the workflow runs. Um, Rant over for now. Um, but I think if you're going to build agentic solutions, there are definitely lots of resources on how do you do how do you start working with the users to figure out what is the right workflow to do through a process. I remember reading some of the I don't remember what those are called, or any of those books are called, but I remember reading a whole bunch when I got into that field of trying to uh, automate processes. Um, but there's plenty of things out there. From a good name, Vishwanath A. Sardeshpande. Interesting. I want to make an AI assistant like the Rabbit R1 or Humane AI Pen. So I want some LLM working for me. Should I use some API services or build an edge computation? So if you want to build something like Rabbit, I think the first step is to build up a scam that where you're going to sell Bitcoin, but don't actually sell, or create some sort of scam around Bitcoin, and then transition to a scam around AI. Oh, you actually want to build a real product rather than what Rabbit did. Sorry, misunderstood or humane. um, uh, LM working for me. Should I use API or build an edge? I mean, I think that's where a lot of these agent solutions are trying to what these agent solutions are trying to achieve. They're trying to allow the model to do more of the work, or at least trigger more of the work. And so using do you have to be a programmer to do this? No. You're going to have a lot more if you are a developer and have that background, you're going to have more luck. But that said, you can do a lot with, as I believe, Flowwise is one of these kind of no code solutions that knows about AI, but also N8N and Rivet. And there's a whole bunch of these tools. Even I think if this and that can work with some models, or Zapier, sorry. Um, which way do you want to go? There's 1,000 ways to do it. I think for me to answer a question, I need a little bit more specifics to go there. Integrate LM with Fortran and punch cards. Yeah, that's hard. One of the my favorite stories of not quite punch cards, but just tape. So originally, I mean, there were punch cards, which were cards, and you would have all the punches in the right place, and then you'd have a stack of these cards and feed that into the computer, and that would bring in the program, that would load the program, do its thing, and spit out an answer. And if you got the punch cards out of order, bad stuff happens. But there was also tape. So I believe it was like a paper tape. So you could load, rather than have a series of punch cards, you'd have basically the punch cards all against on a single piece of paper, and it has the punch. I don't know if it has punch holes or is it just marking. But you have this long tape that is your program, and the original version of Microsoft Basic that who wrote it? Well, they they did a deal with some developer to buy his version of, was that Basic or DOS? I want to say that Basic actually was written by Bill and Paul Allen. Um, and then they made a deal with um, Altair in Albuquerque, to, or was somewhere, and they're on the plane. They've gone ahead and created this program on paper tape, and they're on the plane and going to their destination. And at that point, whoever, I think it was Paul Allen, realizes, oh my God, I didn't write the loader for this. And without having, he obviously doesn't have a laptop or anything like this. He writes the loader from memory in, I don't know, some language. I mean, simple language. Writes a loader by hand, and loads it, and it works the first time. How do you? Oh my God, that's amazing that somebody is able to do that kind of thing. Um, a lot of the story or early stories of how Microsoft started, or how so many other companies started, and what they were able to do. The work that, what's his name at Apple, Wozniak, was able to do early on was just magic, magic. Let's just going through the list before I end. Any Ollama model embedding combo that you'd recommend to be using with agent workflow with tool, calling, and LangGraph? No. I wouldn't recommend using LangChain or LangGraph. I mean, I just don't like, I don't really like the tools. But sorry, that's not right. The tools are fine. I think people jump to LangChain and LangGraph before they actually need it, and so they complicate things more than they need to. I think a lot of these tools, there's no reason that you need RAG or agents or anything else. It's just not that hard. Don't complicate. Don't make your work harder than it needs to be by using tools like LangChain or Crew, or all these other things, which only complicate things and don't make it. I want the job should be easy and not hard. Don't make it harder than it needs to be. Or even a programmer, if you don't talk to stakeholders. Absolutely, absolutely right. Midday stream, yes. One thing I mentioned earlier, I'm going to be trying to do this every day at 9:30 to 10:30 Pacific time. That's Seattle time, or Seattle is often not in the list of like time zone places. LA, Los Angeles is the same time zone. So 9:30 a.m. Los Angeles time, even though I'm in Seattle, sort of Seattle. Uh, AI exhibit. From my own experience, Aider has helped me build a fully functional and feature-rich app in the last week. It's nuts. I have very little coding experience. I hear good things about Aider, and every time I look at it, it's like, oops, how can anybody like this tool? I don't understand why it's interesting. Every time I go through the tutorial, like, how do people like this thing? But some people really love it, and it's got its fans. They've definitely got a lot of testimonials on their website, or on some website about Aider. Of course, all those testimonials are from a year ago, nothing new. But it's amazing that it's has such a following. LangChain is like setting up Obsidian plugins for Obsidian for Zettelkasten just to write one note. Yeah, yeah. Jake, is SearchNG the best way to give models access to the internet? I mean, SearchNG is just or searching or S. I don't know how to pronounce. I always like to go with SearchNG. I don't know if that's the right way. Uh, what's nice about SearchNG is it gives a simple API to a web search. There are other tools out there. In fact, some of them that online services that um, do a good job as well and have a free API. Best way? I don't know. I mean, it's a way. It's a way that I like because it's easy enough to spin up a search ng container on my machine, just have it running so that I can always access searches from a simple API. So I love that. Best? I don't know. That said, I saw a video by or an interview with Mr. Beast. I am not a fan of Mr. Beast's videos, but he's the most popular YouTuber on the planet. Um, and one thing he was talking about was, about giving titles to videos, and the example was, if you're making a video about bananas, the title is not "I like bananas" or "Bananas are really good." You need to be strong, have a really strong opinion. Bananas are the best thing in the world, or like really strong opinion. So I can't. But that said, I can't really say it's the best search experience. It's a search experience. Would LangGraph with Ollama be a bad idea for running a smart LLM web scraper that has a RAG service to store the results while searching multiple pages and keywords? Would LangGraph be with Ollama be a I I think so. You're describing something that's going to scrape stuff off the web and store that in a vector database while searching for multiple. Is it a bad solution? I don't know if it's a bad solution, but I don't it adds complication. It adds and it's a very different way of doing things. It seems to be uh first, it's the first class citizen is using it with ChatGPT or OpenAI's services, and OpenAI just runs a little bit differently than Ollama. It's at a high level, it's the same thing, but the way you actually interact with it is a little bit different. And so it's making assumptions based on you're using it for OpenAI when you're not, you're using it for Ollama. And I just find it complicates it. It tries to bring things to the same complicated level as OpenAI when you're using something that's a lot easier to work with, like Ollama. I don't find that valuable. Is it bad? It depends on what your experience is with Lang. I mean, if you already have spent the time learning the LangChain way of doing things, well, that's probably the better way to do it for you. I wouldn't recommend it for somebody who has not gone through that, but maybe it's okay. I would not recommend it. Did you happen to try the web UI for Aider? No, I didn't know there was a web UI for Aider. I thought it was all. I Are we even talking about the right thing? Same thing. Um, is eight? I thought Aider was just a CLI. I didn't know there was a web UI for Aider. Okay, so this is what I thought it was. Is there a web UI? Yeah, I like all these kind words. They're all from a year ago, before anything else really existed. Let's get rid of that. So I didn't know there was a web UI, and I don't see anything about the web UI. Um, so I'm now using Possessor Whisper Docker to transcode using API. I don't know what that is. Fasatter Whisper Doser. Um, Also a Whisper desktop, and this supports any kind of graphics card. I'm using old RX 580, 4 gig. Should try with Windows. Okay. I don't see a need for it. With VS Code works perfectly fine. Yeah, I mean, if you're a VS Code user, maybe Aider is not the tool you're using. But I think there's plenty of developers who are not using VS Code, but rather, bring this up in a buffer in Emacs or in Vim. Plenty of uh, the fastest developers I know and have always known or ever known at all the companies I work at have always been Vim developers um, or Emacs. Uh, VS Code is great for the rest of us who can't do that. But yeah, could you rank any alternatives for my previous questions? Sorry, I read a lot of questions. Would language? I mean, for doing any sort of like LLM or RAG solutions, any sort of RAG solution, scraping content off the web. I mean, I don't see any reason to complicate things with LangChain. I would just stick with the straight Ollama API to Ollama and whichever vector database you're using. If you're using ChromaDB, then just use the ChromaDB API. It's not that hard. I would say Ollama, working with the Ollama API directly is just a whole lot easier than any frameworks that try to wrap around it, because they make assumptions that are often bad. So I would say just use the Ollama API. It's really easy. And just use the ChromaDB API or whichever vector database you're using. Use their API because they're all really easy to work with. Scraping, I mean, there's all sorts of libraries out there for whatever language you're using for making sure you're just pulling the actual content rather than the ads or extra stuff, extra cruft on the side of any web page, just the good stuff. And so just stick with the basics. All these frameworks, they don't really add much. Faster Whisper is better than Whisper and faster. So I use so there's a lot of ways of running Whisper. There's either Whisper hosted by OpenAI. There's also Whisper that you can the executable that you can download is you go to OpenAI's GitHub, and there's a project for Whisper, and you can download that. That came out maybe a couple weeks after the initial Whisper announcement. So Whisper was announced in September 2022, I think, and by October they had the executable that you could download. Few months later, there was the Whisper CPP by Georgy Gurganov, which is still maintained while the original Whisper code is not. So Whisper CPP is still maintained. And that's what a lot of other tools are based on. The big difference between a lot of tools that I've seen that use Whisper is not so much the code that's actually running Whisper, but which model they're using. So the Whisper models that OpenAI released, there's a small one, like a tiny one, especially if you speak English and English is the only language that you're going to be listening to or hearing, then you can stick with the English one, or otherwise there's tiny without, that's all the languages. And those are fast, but not really super accurate. And then if you go to the largest model, as long as you don't go to the most recent version of the largest model, but you go to the largest model, one of the older versions of it, it is really fast and extremely accurate. And I find that, I speak all my scripts to it first, and then whittle it down to a good script. But it gets all the spelling correct. It gets all the punctuation correct. It's just like magic. and that's an amazing way to work with it. I'd need to learn Python for AI related work, I guess. No, I don't know why people think. I mean, I know why people think that because a lot of examples are in Python, but there is no reason that you need to stick with Python. I mean, if you want to stick with Python, that's great. If you like Python, if you've got an environment for Python on your in your on your machine, know other people, you're friends with people who know Python, great, stick with Python for that reason, not because it's any better or worse for AI stuff than any other language, because it's not. You can do, I don't know of anything you can't do, anything you can do with Python that you can't do with other languages. No. I mean, if you want, Ollama is written 100% in Go. Um, just because, yeah, it's all written in Go. It was originally written in Python, and they transitioned to Go because there were just too many limitations with Python, specifically around building an AI runner that runs on multiple platforms. To be able to run on Mac and Linux and Windows, there were just too many things that we couldn't do if we stuck to Python. So we switched it to Go. And I see so many other projects that start off on Python because it's perceived to be easier to work with, and then they transition off of Python to, a lot of them seem to go to Go or Rust. But yeah. So you don't need to use Python. There are a lot of examples, but once you know Python and maybe another, or once you know any language, it's not that hard to read a Python script and think, okay, I know how to do that in whatever language I care about. Now, some of the libraries are maybe a little bit more mature on Python, NumPy, and a bunch of others, but there's usually an equivalent for whatever other language. Now, that said, you're probably not going to do this in Lua because I tried and I didn't really go far. But for, if you're using TypeScript or JavaScript or PHP or, all these other languages, common Go or Rust, common modern languages, there's probably all the libraries, they probably exist on those platforms as well, or on those languages as well. Is LangChain LangGraph the only way to provide tools to LLMs with? No, there's no. No. I mean, if you want to use, so is LangChain LangGraph the only way to provide tools to LLMs with function calling? No. You can do function in just using Ollama, do the Ollama API directly with function calling. It works I said out of the box. There's no box, but you can totally do function calling with Ollama. You don't need LangChain or anything like that. It just works using the regular API. And it works. You don't have to use any specific model. It works with all the models. I haven't found any models that don't do function calling reliably using Ollama. So yeah. Yes, I use base. I checked with large v3, but two. What do I use? Let me see I'm still on that screen. Yeah. If I go to my Super Whisper settings, I'm using the Pro model, I think. Modes. Default is Pro English. So these are the different models that are, it's like there's a new, oh no, so it's 1.5 gigs. It's not as fast as the fast or the small, tiny model, and these are just, I think these are slightly different names, but they are the same models that OpenAI created. And I find that to be, it's maybe I mean, I guess it depends on your hardware, but a tiny bit slower and so much more powerful. As said, I'm on a M1 Max MacBook Pro with 64 gigs. Python rand is legendary. Yes. Yeah, sorry. FYI, Python is my go-to. I'm a business intelligence guy, so pandas and NumPy are just too comfortable. Yeah, I mean, if you're comfortable with that, great, go for it. But there's no reason that you have to start there. And there are equivalents to pandas and NumPy on that are often like exactly the same parameters and the way you use it on other languages as well. So whichever one, and so it's often very easy to translate a tutorial for Python to some other languages. Okay, so I said I was going to do an hour. I said, okay, we're a little over, but I'm going to stop it now. Thanks so much for being here. It's 10:54. I'm going to do this again tomorrow, 9:30 Pacific time. And we'll see what else we can talk about. I'm going to spend a little bit of time cleaning some things up and see if I can pull things out that are interesting. And yeah, thanks so much for being here. Let's go to just my camera. Oh man, all these things. These are great. I'm just hanging out here listening to all the people saying thank you. Oh, it looks like we're over. Okay. Thanks so much for being here. And I'm going to find the end stream button. End stream. I need to press two buttons. I need end stream and end stream on the stream deck. Otherwise, the stream starts mysteriously without me being here. Only done that once. End.